So as Brother Rod so eloquently put it, in some back and forth that we had today, relationships are critical, right, to the sustainment of the human population. And as humans, we relate to other people and other beings in specific ways that enhances our lives or detracts from our lives. So we have a handful of questions that we want to kind of consider and talk through as it relates to relationships. And the first one is, and John, I don't know if you have those or not, but oh, there we go. Why are relationships important to you as an individual?
I had all different types of relationships, right? I had a mother, I had family members, uh, cousins I was close to. Uh, but for me, early on, I realized that while that was a relationship I was born into, as I later grew and learned more about this whole idea of relationships, uh, and was able to kind of pick my own people that I had relationships with, uh, I noticed a difference, right? Uh, and I would just be really, really short with it. So for me, uh, they're important to me as an individual because I realize the importance of me as a human, being able to relate to other humans, right? No one gets anywhere by themselves.
Absolutely.
Whether it's an encouraging word from a friend or significant other, or whether it's someone to hold you accountable when you struggle with doing that yourself for various reasons. Uh, so I just realized that it's it's a good thing, and it felt good to have to have good relationships with people. Uh, Growing up in a place where I know a lot of people struggled from having to look over their shoulder a lot, you know, because of actions they had taken or things they had done to other people, not knowing when it was coming back to them. So I just realized that for us as individuals, relationships are vital. I would just say that someone we born into, and your family members are supposed to love you because you're family. They're supposed to look out for you because you're family. Uh, uh, but sometimes they don't do the things that would say that they love you or that they're looking out. And that's why for me, the relationships I think that you choose and that you choose to maintain become to me the most critical ones that you have. So it's a lot more to say about that, but for me, that's why relationship in general is important to me, uh, because it's helped me grow and develop into the man I am today. Over.
All right, I'm gonna jump in so I can change up the flow because no man, when Ryan said realizing that there are many different types of relationships, that's the part that just because I know when we were growing up, you would define a relationship as something that two people that were in love romantically. That was what you called a relationship, and then you didn't consider your friends or
Right.
classmates or your parents or your family. You didn't consider any of those other the relationship you got with the people at the grocery store, which my grandmother had some amazing relationships and really taught me how to navigate life and treat people in a way that they could trust you and respect you. So, you know, seeing all those relationships and then coming to that point where you realize how much currency there is to relationships. Les Brown quoted a statistic that talked about, when you talk about longevity of life, good health is important and diet and exercise, he said, but the single most important indicator of longevity of life is your relationships and your social support. And I believe that because I remember many years ago, I think I was a young airman, and we were looking at um, going to volunteer to go to the Hale House in New York, where the babies that they had abandoned because they were HIV positive, and they just needed people to hold the babies, because if they didn't have that kind of connection, they would get ill and a lot of them would die, and realizing that really early how much. And it's funny because we understand the things that infants and kids need, and then we act like as adults we don't need it no more. We still need it. It might be in different forms, but we still need it. So just coming to that realization of how important relationships are really stemmed from me really understanding what the relationships were. And so I'm introverted, but I'm a social guy, so relationships are key to me. So
All right, I'm gonna jump in before Dr. Danley because I swear I hate following you, bro. I ain't doing it today.
This would be a quick one for me. I mean, first of all, Rod and John said a lot of what I was planning to say anyway, so it's all good. Go ahead.
Yeah,
though.
but you still likely to throw one of them large words in there, and I'm sitting there like, doggone it. Okay, but yeah, I agree with everything that John and Rod said. And for me, relationships are important because I'm a people person. I love being around people, and I was amazed that I actually ended up like that because, like I told you guys last season, I felt like I was bullied, and I just all I wanted to do was fit in, But yeah, family relationships are important. I have you guys, the three of you and Byron, you're like my brothers. I didn't have any brothers growing up. But so through the military, I was able to meet several people who are like that are closer to me than a lot of my family members. So relationships are important for me. They make me feel good about myself. I know that it's unconditional love between all of us. So it just does wonders for me. So like I said, it's just important. That's why it's important to me, because it actually has done wonders for me. So go ahead, Kev. Now you can fire away and.
Yeah, again, this would be rather short because again, I don't want to do a lot of I don't want to spend a lot of time duplicating efforts, right? Again, you all have kind of said a lot of what I feel about the importance of relationships. And for starters, there's been a ton of research, right, that's been conducted that proves that people who have fulfilling relationships with family, friends, community, whatever, tend to lead happier lives, have fewer health problems. They tend to live longer in general. So that in and of itself, is probably a good enough reason to kind of, appreciate relationships. But, on a more personal level, for me, again, I think Rod said it first. I think about where I am today, right? I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't be who I am today had it not been for the relationships that I've established and been blessed and fortunate enough to have over the course of my lifetime, to include with the three of you. And so, again, I just wouldn't be who I am without that. I think about, obviously my relationship with my mom, right? That's kind of where it started. And then, my grandmother, my aunt, my cousins, my god brothers and god sisters, my bishop at my church, and then, moving on into the military and everyone. And it's just been, and then like Ray stated, I'm an extrovert, right? I'm an extreme extrovert, which is weird because I'm on the total. I'm on one end. I mean, at the very far end of the extrovert spectrum, whereas Felicia, my wife, is on the total opposite end of the introvert spectrum. But as an extrovert, we draw energy from socializing, right? And having relationships. And so, without that, man, yeah, I would be, if I didn't have relationships, I don't know what I'd be doing. I'd probably be somewhere depressed. But yeah, in any case, that those are all of the reasons that, relationships are important to me. So I guess we'll move on to question B, or point B. What have you learned about what healthy relationships look like and feel like to you? For me, that's and that's an ongoing thing, honestly. But when I think about it, growing up for me, there were healthy relationships. However, from a romantic relationship standpoint, I didn't see a lot of healthy, romantic relationships growing up. Unfortunately, my mom was single, and um, you know, my aunt got married early on, but her husband went in the army, and I wasn't around that very often. Probably the closest thing I saw to a healthy romantic relationship was the bishop in my church and his wife. Um, but even with that, I still, because they served their roles, right? He was like a surrogate dad to me, but they served their roles. So usually when you saw them, my relationship with him was based on mostly one-on-one. So we didn't get to see them a lot, kind of serving as husband and wife, because they were doing their duties as pastors, right? And and pastor's wife. But so that's one of those things where, unfortunately for me, I've had to learn just trial and error, right? Trial and error over time in having relationships and making a lot of mistakes in those relationships, and still making mistakes in relationships. I think I'm a lot better, and Lord knows I do put forth the effort. But so I didn't have a a real healthy relationship that I was around all the time growing up, from a romantic standpoint, that is. But as far as just because, like John said, back then we didn't really view it as a relationship. When you had friends, right? Your god brothers, your god sisters, your parents, whatever the case is, it wasn't a relationship. That's my mom, that's my brother, that's my whatever. But in retrospect, I can look back and say, yeah, I certainly had a lot of healthy relationships, um, with regards to that. And I think that the reason that I am the way that I am now regarding my relationships and trying to cultivate them, is based on how healthy those relationships were when I was growing up, right? My god brothers and my god sisters, we're all still tight to this day for the most part, right? We still keep in touch. We still, it's all of that. And we've been, together and known each other since, oh my God. I mean, I think I started, I was at the church when I was, oh man, I don't even know. I was maybe 8, 9 years old, right? So these people have been in my life, for all these years, and we're still tight, and we still have each other's backs as God brothers and God sisters. And so that certainly has gone a long way to helping me know what a healthy relationship should look like when it comes to friendships. So I think I took the long way around that, but I just kind of wanted to, I guess, distinguish between a romantic versus, a relationship that's something other than.
Wow. So we had talked earlier about it being a lot to unpack. It's a lot to unpack about, relationships, especially healthy relationships,
Right.
and what they look like and feel like to me now, as opposed to when I was 20, right? Or when I was a teenager. Um, and so I will try and keep it short, just to say that healthy relationships uh, look like being given the grace and the space to grow into uh, who you're going to become, not necessarily who you are today, right? But with that, you have to believe in uh, the ability for humans to grow and be better than they are today, right? Uh, and a lot of times, I don't know that we get that opportunity, because so often we're judged, prejudged, misjudged, any kind of judge you want to add to it. But we're judged based on how people see us through their lenses. And of course, their lenses are filled with their experiences, their past trauma, things that someone else did to them that they've brought forward now into the relationship that they have with you. And so I would just say that what it looks like a healthy relationship, what it looks like to me is reciprocity, being given that space to grow, knowing that I'm growing every day, uh, and really trying to wrap around this concept of love that people toss around, and I find if you talk to 1,000 people, you're gonna get 1,000 meanings of what that is to them, right? But we have to have enough empathy, and also respect for our differences, that you allow people to kind of be who they are, right? And then you get to determine whether they get to be that in your life or not. So uh, so I will turn it over to one of the other brothers. Uh, for the sake of time, I could probably ramble on about it forever, but that's it.
All right, John. I guess I'll hop in. Wow, it's amazing. What have you learned about what healthy relationships look like? Man, I tell you, that's you talking about evolution. You know, um, when we talked about when we talk about parenting, parents' love. Um, it was kind of difficult for me to see what that love was, because mom and dad both worked. My dad more or less worked Monday through Friday, 3 to midnight. My mom, especially when she became a business owner, a cosmetologist, my mom worked Tuesday through Saturday. So really, the only days I even got to see my parents even interact was on Sunday, and we spent part of the day on Sunday in church. Me, my mom, my sister. So for me, I knew my dad's way of showing love was purchasing stuff, but I had to listen to what other folks, what like my mom, what she needed. There came a point in time where my dad retired. He couldn't afford to do all the things that he did before. But listening to my mom talk to him is like, Raymond, you don't have to buy me all these big gifts. A card or a loving word is more than enough from you, because we've been in this for so long. And seeing my parents being married for 47 years, that was incredible to me. But I know they both evolved. And so for me, again, I evolved over time from what I've seen. And this, I know communication is big, you know um but seeing my parents go through hell and high water together for as long as they have, seen that my in-laws have gone through hell and high water together for well over 50 years. It's incredible. So again, I'm still evolving. I'm still evolving, because I know the man I am today is not going to be the man I am going to be tomorrow or next week. So I'm just trying to learn how to be a better human being, a better husband, better father, better friend. So again, so for me, like again, it's all about evolution for me.
That's a whole word right there, still evolving, because like for me, it's I had to evolve to be able to identify healthy relationships in my life and where I've seen it. And I can give an example. When I was a young airman, Brother Rod was my supervisor. I'm a senior airman. He's a big time senior master sergeant. So there was no, there's not a lot of equality in that relationship. But and Kev always makes the joke he don't know how we got along, because we both are a lot alike. And I told him, I said, I never saw our relationship as being problematic. It didn't feel for a long time until I got further along in my career, it didn't feel close, but it was respectful. But then when I was able to go back and look and see some of the things, I was like, wow, that was one of my early examples of a healthy relationship. I remember first coming on and there was a situation with my orders or something. And, Rod came to me with the information he had. And the people that had given him the information were painting it as if, I was a bad actor. And I'm a little bit of a hothead. I wasn't disrespectful, but I didn't like it. I'm like, wait a minute, let me tell my side of the story. This is what happened. Like whatever they saying, they might feel that way, but I did none of the things that they're accusing, and I thought for a long time, I thought that went away because I was right. And learning through my career that people in positions of power don't care, a lot of times don't care nothing about whether they right or wrong. They got power and position. But, we had a respectable conversation, and there's so many ways in my career that he gave me space to grow, gave me space to mess up, mess up a lot. But man, he was always there as I remember one time coming into the office and having a conversation about playing basketball. And I said, yo, man, my boss is cool. Because, he just seemed like I always looked up to him, but he just seemed like a really stern person, just always serious. And then we got to talk about basketball. And I'm like, yo, he cool. And so, but looking back on it, I can see, just there was so many spaces. And then both of y'all, there's so many spaces where y'all showed me what it looks like to give somebody space to be an unfinished project, and I think a lot of times we get into unhealthy relationship patterns when we expectations or somebody should be like this, like that. Now, obviously, all of y'all had no problem checking me when I was being my wildest version of myself, but I think what made me realize it was healthy is that we could disagree, we could argue, whatever it was, but it didn't terminate the relationship. And, me growing up, that was a child growing up with abandonment issues. I always felt like when somebody got upset with me, the relationship was over, that it was time for them to discard me. So, looking back, I think, wow, I probably still need to come to terms to realize how much all of you have done for me. So, understanding that, that's, for me, those are healthy relationships.
Cool. Question C.
So before we go to question C, I just wanted to piggyback off of what John brought up real quick, because I think that space and grace that he talked about, I don't really see a whole lot of it anymore. And that's very unfortunate. And I think it is because I think that people, when they get to a place where they feel like they've arrived or they've evolved into something that people look up to, maybe it's a position or rank that they have or a title, they lose sight of the fact that they used to be in their early 20s as well. And they lose sight of the fact that, because I always say, we always talk about, we're just a product of our environment, our experiences. And if no one ever pours into us anything different, then that's all that we'll ever be. Just an older, worse version of that. So I just wanted to say, I certainly appreciate that insight, because I'm a little older now, so I don't remember every story, but that brought to mind the time frame that he was talking about, and I just remember being extremely proud of the fact that knowing he grew up on the east side of San Antonio, but he had so much in him. He just needed, an opportunity to have the good come out, because people will run you in the ground no matter
And a
what.
whole lot of guidance.
Definitely have that. And so I would just say for people out there, struggling in any way with any type of relationship, especially those where you might have a problem with someone that you work for, a supervisor at work or whatever, don't lose sight of the fact that they're an individual as well, and they have their own struggles. And sometimes people use their positions and their positions of authority and power to act out, what they might not be able to do at home, and they know they
There it
can do
is.
and get away with it at work. They'll bring it to work and pound on you all day long, So I'm grateful and extremely blessed to have met Airman Singletary when I did, because it added a lot of value to me in my life as well, as a supervisor, as someone that recognized that that people are people, and they need to be cared for, and so I appreciate that, brother.
And he pushed your limits as in a supervisory role, right?
Hey, you know what? And I always say, but yet here we still stand, right?
Here we stand, right? Oh, funny. All right. Point C. What is the greatest lesson you have learned about relationships through your own experience?
So real quick, I'll go, and I think one of the greatest lessons that I've learned is that they constantly evolve, and and it's just easy to say that, but when I sit back and I look at the relationships that I've had or that I do have, and just recognize that it's not the same today as it was yesterday or last year or 10 years ago or however long ago. And I think that, we as individuals, we have to have, more patience. We have to seek to understand, before we seek to be understood, and so I would just say that the greatest lesson is that I recognize that relationships do evolve, and that's saying the people in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. That's real,
man.
That's so real. So I'll pass it over.
You just took what I was going to say. You really did. I was going to say that. Because I was sitting here thinking like, man, I've learned so many lessons regarding relationships, but I was going to tackle it from that angle, right? In the sense of maybe the greatest lesson I've learned is that sometimes you have to let them go, and you have to know when to let them go, right? For that very reason that you just said, because people come into your life for either a reason, a season, or a lifetime, right? And so you have to be able to discern, which one it is sometimes, right? And you may not always want to let go, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship or something like that. If it's a well-valued relationship or friendship, sometimes it can be almost like a romantic relationship in the sense that you don't want to let it go, but sometimes things run their course, right? And you just have to know when it's time when it's time to just let them go. And that's not always the easiest thing to do. I've been there and done that, so I know. But I really do think that might be, it's certainly one of the greatest lessons regarding relationships that I've had to learn, is to know when to let them go and when they have run their course.
I feel judged. I feel so judged. I feel like he dug in the bag of conversations that we've had over the years and said, "Yeah, this was for you, with your never wanting to let go."
Okay, for me, wow, I really resonated with the the reason, season, or lifetime, knowing when to let go. Man, sometimes the people you have to let go, it could be a familial relationship.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's some family that I have, as the old saying is, all kinfolk ain't skin folk and all blood ain't family. I've had to let a lot of family members go because, they just did not mean me any good. You know, my dad, one thing I just always remember my dad saying he was the Lone Ranger. So one of the things I've always learned, he was like he could go through everything alone. Well, he didn't have to go through anything alone. He had my mom, he had me, he had my sister. You know, but the one thing that I have learned through my relationships, whether they're loving, relationships with my wife, relationships with my friends and my brothers, it doesn't matter what I'm going through. Uh, I've learned I'm never going through anything alone. That's the one thing I could say that I have learned. Um, um, the greatest lesson for me is that no matter what I'm going through, I'm not going through it alone.
Do you think people in our community sometimes struggle, or why do you think people in our community sometimes struggle with roles within relationships?
Hmm.
I guess I'll jump off on that one. I think I think there are probably multiple reasons, but I think the two that maybe come to mind for me, and this is just my opinion, obviously, but I think one reason is because the best relationships, and I'm just going to talk from the standpoint of a man, and probably more specifically a black man. I think one of the reasons is because the best relationships display vulnerability, right? And vulnerability creates genuine connection, and we know that we as black men have struggled traditionally with vulnerability, right? We discussed this last season. I think more than once we discussed it. And so I think that fear of opening up and being vulnerable, which is what it takes to make a true genuine connection, is one of the reasons that, again, I'm not talking our relationships. I'm just talking from the standpoint of a black man right now, right? I think that's one of the reasons why we sometimes struggle with relationships. And then I think another reason is something that Bell Hooks, who I love. Oh my God, I love Bell Hooks. Rest in peace. She wrote about it in her book titled "All About Love." And granted, again, the focus is on romantic love, but in it, she talks about how men in American culture have been socialized to mistrust not only the value but also the power of love, while conversely, women have been socialized to be loving in most situations, right? Even when their need to receive love goes unmet. And so I think that also, in a lot of ways, plays a part in the struggle with men and with women. And so I will admit, I do believe the younger generations, the millennials, the Gen Zers, I think in some ways they're breaking that mold to some degree, to some, a modicum of change, I guess. But even at the same time, I still see some of that in them as well. And so I think we have to be cognizant of these things, that I just, those two things that I just talked about. And I think we just have to work to be better. When you know better, you do better. And so I think, yeah, it's just incumbent upon us to recognize when those sorts of things are going on and to do everything that we can to be better.
Yeah, great, great point. And just to piggyback on the topic of vulnerability, uh, and I often think, so what's the one thing that helps you overcome that feeling of vulnerability? It's trust, you know,
Yeah.
and I think that we probably struggle with a lack thereof. for various reasons, but specifically to the roles of especially men and women within our community, I have to go back to slavery, and I think it was intentional. You know, if you as a man had to watch your woman
Yeah.
be taken, and you could do nothing about it, you know, that's psychologically now that's starting to break you down. And then when she comes back to you, now psychologically you can't get over that to love her in the way that she needs to be loved. And then that perpetual cycle continues throughout years, year after year, after hundreds of years. And I think it spilled over into why you know, sometimes men in our community, you know, act and behave the way that we do, especially towards the women that we're supposed to love, you
Right.
know, and to come up with a solution for that, you know, you could sell that and never have to work again. Uh, because I think it does get back to you have to be able to break that cycle of mistrust and knowing that the only way that you can get to allow yourself to be vulnerable is to trust. You know, so and it also created this this breakdown of the African American family and this introduction of single mothers raising kids, especially men, boys, you know, and in some instances, you know, it grew into being worn as a badge of honor, you know, yeah. Uh, but I think if you look throughout our communities across the country, you will see the impact of the lack of a man in the home. And so that to me is as much of an epidemic as anything else in this country. And I think that's the one thing that we as African Americans I know would need to address if we're ever uh, to help ourselves solve our own problems. And of course, it can go as deep as you're willing to peel back that onion to see. But I do think that has definitely hampered uh, us being able to move forward as a community. You know, and then you hear people. I mean, just look at now. You know, this generation, a lot of people choosing not to get married.
Yeah.
You know, I don't I don't need you as a man. I don't need no man to have a baby. Not when I can go to the store, you know, and get and get whatever I need to have a baby by myself. So it's challenging, because I do think that especially young boys, they benefit from having two parents in the household and getting the love and caring and nurturing of a mother and the teaching and the accountability from a father uh, to be as well rounded as possible. Not saying that that people that grow up in single parent households can't be that or be successful, because certainly they can. But a lot of times it takes them recognizing their own deficiencies and working to get better themselves. You know, and I say that having been raised by a single mother.
I was just going to say 3 of us on this
Right.
call are certainly proof
Yeah,
of that point. So,
yeah. And which is why I have so much love, admiration, and respect for watching her struggle to do that. Uh, but also knowing that uh, I probably could have really benefited from having my dad. And my dad died when I was, 22 months old. So it wasn't as if he walked away, which would be a whole nother thing to get over, right?
right.
But the impact was still the same. And the streets that I had to grow up in were still the same. And they didn't.
And that's important. When we understand our roles, we understand that, just like other people have been programmed to see us in a certain way, we've also been programmed to see ourselves in that same way.
Absolutely.
I think about, I remember I would drive through Tennessee when I was stationed in Illinois because I was on my way to South Carolina to get LJ. And I remember being at a gas station. There was a black man with dreads walking by me, and I kind of got in defensive position, like, all right, let's see. He wasn't doing nothing out there. Normally, he was just walking towards me, going to the store, like I was at a pump. And then, I spoke to him, and he smiled. He's like, "Hey, man, how you doing, brother?" And he walked on, and I felt so ashamed of myself because, this is a brother that's going through the same struggles that I'm going through, and I judged him how people with nefarious, mindsets would judge him. So yeah, a lot of that. But when I look at the roles, it's specifically this question talks about struggling with our roles within relationships. I think another thing, if I'm trying to add something new to this robust conversation that Kev and Rod have already built out, I think I would want to add is that there has been a new call for authenticity in these relationships. And here's what I mean by that. Obviously, we understand that in society, as we fought for rights for different groups, one of the groups heavily impacted by getting those rights are women. And so sometimes you got young men, young women, like you'll hear women say, "Oh, y'all ain't the same kind of men that our granddaddies were." Well, yeah, because they had different leverage than we did. And not in a bad way, it was just different. And when you think about, or you hear guys complaining about, well, women this, women that. I'm like, well, yeah, once upon a time, a woman couldn't sign leases, get a mortgage. They couldn't get a bank account. They couldn't get a credit card. So there was a lot of life that they were restricted from. I watched my grandmother, and I used to feel like, yo, where's the love in her relationship? But grandma had to do what she had to do to survive and raise kids, and then having grandkids in the house all the time. All the time. There was always some of us living up in there with my grandmother. And, there was some things that she had to tolerate that a woman that got her own today ain't got to put up with. And a lot of times men need to come with personality and, they got to come, they got to bring some originality. They can't just say, ha, man, I showed up. And I've seen brothers shrinking from that challenge. But just to say that, I think not to blame, or I think we're really living in an age where it's a push more towards authenticity. And I'll wrap it up like because of all of the things y'all said, and we're struggling to figure out authentically where we fit in the roles of the relationships as we evolve.
That's a great point, John. It really was.
Yeah, that was a great point. And with that, I have nothing because you just took the last. The only thing I had was, the roles may not have been defined, but you just took that right out from underneath me. And, Kevin and Rod both talk about the fear of being vulnerable and, being a product of your environment. So, yeah, Ray Butler has nothing. So I yield the floor. Let's move on.
What would you like our audience to understand about relationships they are engaged in each day that some may take for granted?
Wow.
I'll go real quick. So what I'd like the audience to take away regarding relationships, their daily relationships, uh, is that they have to be able to get to a place where you're willing to let people grow. And I know we've said that earlier, but I would think that from day to day, you have to do that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people talk about, well, I don't understand why he or she acts that way because I wouldn't do that. You're right, because you're not them. You haven't gone through what they've gone through. Maybe you haven't been treated like they were treated. And maybe there are things that you don't quite understand about their struggle. It does not take away from the fact that it's still their struggle. Now you have to decide if that relationship is worth you allowing them to grow and then you deciding to grow yourself. And if the answer to that is that, yes, it absolutely is that important to me, now you have to figure out how to do the work that you need to do in order to get to that place where y'all can coexist together, no matter what type of relationship it is. And I will pass it on.
Thank you. Let me jump in because y'all be taking all the meat off the bone. No, I mean, I think that's an incredible insight. Engaged every day. I think, and Rod really opened us up with the having grace, that space for grace, and really, if you are engaged in a relationship, the root word is relate. And I think a lot of times we frame relationships on our needs and not enough on relating to each other. And I think about with my dad, man. So my dad was around. He he lived in the same city. He bounced. You know what I'm saying? It was just he bounced, and well, he lived in the same city for a while. Then he moved. Good for him. But I remember, in my 30s, it was the Atlanta conference when we were all up in Atlanta at the Omni Center, and
Atlanta's never been the same. I'm sorry.
Say, man. This is a positive podcast, sir.
Just saying.
Oh man.
I hadn't seen him in maybe 15 years, and I decided that I knew he was in the area, so I'd have him pick me up from the airport and we catch up a little bit, and then establish a relationship with him. But I didn't realize I was still carrying hurt. And maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was in therapy. I was talking with my therapist, and I said, it's just crazy to me as a father and how much I love my son and how, it's just so important to me. It's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that my man just looked at me as his kid and he just bounced. And man, I boo-hooed. Like, it took me a long time to be able to say that without crying. You know what I mean? And so it kind of rose up. I kind of got angry again. I'm angry. And been doing some work on that, very tough work on that in the last year or so, because, we're looking at my father's mortality. I tell him all the time, I said, man, you you getting by on the extra because you done lived a hard life and you done made it to your mid-70s. Like, yo, you so like you on borrowed time, brother. So, but it's just realizing, that there were real things that he went through. There's a hurt in him that made him do the things that he did. And this is to use the word again, this is an egregious case, and relating to that. There are people in your life that show up and we get upset over inconveniences and little misunderstandings. And, just saying, I realize in all of my relationships, if I can take the time to relate to a man who was given the task spiritually of being my primary caretaker, and that his absence shaped the way that I view the world and my place in it. And, made me feel like, if your dad wouldn't stick around, why would anybody else? And that I've had to work through all of that. And if I can take time to relate to his hurt and find healing for me and our relationship, you mean to tell me I can't, appreciate relationships because I'm mad at somebody because they were supposed to call me at 7 and they didn't call till 7:05? Really? Like I'm going to be so much that I will toss somebody away and I'm kind of OCD about that a little bit, but so that example was specific to me. But in our relationships day to day, let's just do what we can to really relate and see where the person is coming from. A lot of times we're assigning meanings to these actions that doesn't actually exist. People actually mean well and want to do right by you, but all of us are out here, our perspectives, our perceptions, lifing, and all of this. And so just take some time to relate to the people. If you love them and you care for them and you're thankful and you want to maintain that relationship, a lot of space for grace and take some time to relate.
All right, I'm gonna jump in before Dr. Danley. I'm sorry, brother, because See, you said one of them big words last segment. I'm not letting you do it again. Nope, I'm jumping right on in here. So excuse me while I whip this out. But what I would tell the audience is, if nothing else, look inside, and you have to remember that nobody is perfect. Nobody is perfect. We can all learn something new every day. You have to be willing to grow and listen to your significant other, to your loved one, to whomever you're having that relationship with, whether it's familial or whatever. You have to be willing to grow and listen without getting angry, especially if what they're trying to tell you is coming from a place of love. Quick story. My daughter was trying to tell me something and I got upset about it, and my daughter's exact words was like, well, Dad, don't get butthurt. And I got even angrier, and I'm like, I can't believe this kid just said that to me, and then when I literally thought about it after she and I got off the phone, I'm like, oh my God, she was right. I did get butthurt, and let me understand what she was trying to tell me. And when I finally did that, I was able to grow. I didn't know everything. I don't know everything. I'm never going to know everything, and here it was. I had to stop looking at it from, okay, this is my daughter telling me this, to this is a grown woman giving me her perspective, and I need to understand it and appreciate it, so that's one thing I would definitely tell the audience. And I would also say, if someone is trying to grow or improve, then try and grow and improve with them, because ultimately it's going to help you. And Dr. Danley, the floor is yours, sir.
A few quick things, and I do mean quick. First, I'll say, if you find a relationship valuable, if you have a relationship, no matter what it is, whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, whatever the case is, any relationships that you find to be valuable, you have to intentionally cultivate them. You can't just let it be one-sided. You can't be the taker and the other person be the giver, right? There has to be some give and take. And, we know that all relationships are a two-way street. So, and they need to be intentionally cultivated. That's one. The second thing that I will say is make a habit of not holding someone's past against them. Right. And I know that both Rod and Ray kind of alluded to this a bit. Right. So when someone works hard to grow and change into a better person, allow them to show up as that person. I have posted that a few different times on different mediums, but I'll say it again. Make a habit of not holding someone's past against them. When someone works hard to grow and change into a better person, allow them to show up as that person. Right. Because we all grow and change. Like, I'm not going to be the same exact person tomorrow that I am today, right? And so certainly after 10, 12, 15 years, people change, right? Hopefully for the better. That's the goal. So allow people to show up as they are and not holding something against them from their past. And then the last thing I'll say is, obviously we've been talking about relationships all night and all this, but make sure that you remember yourself. I know I just said that a relationship is a two-way street, right? It's between two people, but think about yourself as well in it, right? And your relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship that you have, right? You treat yourself with love and respect that you deserve. You do that for other people. And when people see that you treat yourself that way, then they probably realize that you're not going to allow them to treat them or to treat you any other way than that as well, with love and respect, the love and respect that you deserve and the love and respect that they deserve. And that's all I have to say about that. So I don't know if anybody else has anything before we wrap this up. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I got some thoughts. Since we said we're going to go with a book, we went with some nice book selections last time, but in the spirit of relationships, and it's going to come from left field, but a book that I highly recommend, Marriage Be Hard by Kevin and Melissa Fredericks. And I will say this, the reason why I highly suggest this book is they hid a book about taking personal responsibility for all of your life relationships, and they hid it under a marriage title, but basically they talked about being 16, 17 years in and realizing where the cracks were in their relationship during COVID. And they break it wide open, how church impacted the way they saw things, how they come from one perspective or the other. And I got so much out of the book. I was like, they really could have left out the word marriage because it was just asking them to reflect on who they were as people. And so as we're talking about relationships, I highly suggest this book because you read it and it will very much encourage you to take a deeper dive on who you are and how you show up in all of your relationships.
Nice. And I hope everybody also caught the book that I mentioned earlier, All About Love, from Bell Hooks. So yeah, definitely. We like throwing out some good books out there. So for sure. All right. So with that, we want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us. As we wrap up this week's episode, I want to leave you with a quote by an unknown author. No relationship is all sunshine, but two people can share one umbrella and survive the storm together. Until next time, peace.